So why am I really frustrated? Like, I'm frustrated with the outcome, but why am I frustrated with the outcome? What internally is going on that I'm not courageous enough to unpack and say, okay, really, I'm taking this situation personal,
Yes.
right?
You just hit it.
I've made this more personal than it needs to be. Though I'm telling you, I want this expectation met, and I'm frustrated that it's not. Really, the outcome is making me feel insecure, or it's making me feel like, oh, I'm less of a leader because. Hey, before we jump into the podcast, we want to thank all our donors and supporters who make the Today Count Show possible. It's through your generosity that we're able to shape leaders through this content and this podcast. And be sure to like, subscribe, and follow wherever you find yourself coming across this content. All right, let's get to the podcast. Most people avoid conflict, but conflict isn't the problem. Poorly handled conflict is. Today on the Today Count Show, we're talking about conflict, how to handle conflict, how to have a hard conversation. And this might be helpful whether you are in the marketplace, ministry, maybe just at home, Jim.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna, jump in, unpack this, give some practical handles on what we believe is a critical space in our leadership today. I'm Winston Harris, your co-host, joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Jim Piper.
Yeah, let's do this.
Jump on in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Jump on in. Can you recall a time where you knew you had to have a conversation, and you knew it was going to be an uncomfortable conversation, a not fun conversation, and you kind of kicked the can down the road, and then by the time you get into the conversation, you're like, yeah, this could have been avoided. This all could have been avoided.
Is that a rhetorical question? Or are you about to share one of yours? Or are you asking me?
I'm asking you if you got one.
Sure. I think that I think unless you're a jerk, nobody likes conflict. But there is, and I don't know that conflict is the issue. Conflict is a reality, right? Different needs, different perspectives, different expectations, different goals. It's an old cliche, Winston, but it goes like this: anything that moves causes friction. So if you're trying to do something, if you're trying to be in something, if you're trying to be with somebody, you're going to have conflict. But to answer your question in confession, yeah, I mean, sometimes I talk myself out of having those conversations because I'll rationalize, I'll go, well, maybe I'm just being hard. Maybe I'm just being micromanager. Maybe I'm just being weak, and give the person benefit of the doubt. And those are all disguises. Maybe not all of them, but most of the time, yeah, you end up coming back to the conflict.
Yeah. I think, time and time again, I find myself in this space. And what's kind of frustrating is you think maybe you've taken a few steps forward in this area, and you're like, okay, yeah, I think I can identify when a conversation is needed, and maybe I've even built up that muscle to have the conversation. But then there will be times when I'll find myself like, why am I having this conversation so late in the game? Like, how did I allow myself to get back here where I didn't address this as soon as I should have? And
Yeah, and you're there when you're having to recall. You're recalling something a week ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 months ago, 10 years ago.
you have a running list now.
Yeah. And so you've already blown it if you're having to go back too far and rewind to come up with your evidence of why you're right or why they're wrong or whatever.
Yeah, and I think at the essence of it, I think at some level, whether consciously or unconsciously, we all know what it means to avoid a conversation. We know what it feels like internally, even if we're not putting language to it, even if life is happening so fast that you didn't consciously say, I'm not going to have this conversation. And a situation arises with a person, once again, a colleague, a spouse, a friend, whoever that might be. And even as I'm talking about this might be coming to your forefront right now that, okay, there's a conversation that I know I need to have, and I just haven't had it. And to your point, Jim, you can rationalize. You can say, okay, I need the perfect context. I need the right environment. I need the timing isn't right. And but ultimately, what we find usually is that when we don't have that conversation when it needs to happen, by the time we have it, if we even get to have it, it's way worse than originally when we first saw that, red flag, if you will. And so the main idea we're talking about is the quality of your relationships and leadership is often determined by the quality of your difficult conversations. Um, Jim, in essence, why do you think so many people avoid difficult conversations?
Well, there's the academic list. There's fear of rejection, fear of hurting somebody, fear of being misunderstood, fear of escalation. But I think what I would do is I would like to couch that in the fact that if conflict is an event, then if it's a summit, if it's an event, and then there's probably already something wrong in how we deal with misaligned expectations, or however you want to call it.
When you say something's wrong, can you?
Yeah, it's kind of like I guess what I said. I think we've talked about this before. At least we've glanced by it on this podcast in one of the episodes. But I talked about a college class that I took when I was just like 2021. You remember that? And I and I thought I was taking a class in geography, which did
Geology, though.
yeah, but it's geology, and those are two completely different classes. One you take in fourth grade, and the other one apparently you take in college. But I do remember one thing that the instructor said, and why I've always remembered it and have coined it or context it within leadership and relationships. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure, but it struck me this way. But anyway, the instructor said that in Southern California, there's these things called plates, and when they move, that's what causes earthquakes. And then he said something pretty interesting. He said, what we want in Southern California, or in California in general, is you want a lot of little tremors. You want a lot of little earthquakes. You want it to be normal. It's almost like, oh, another tremor today. And you just go, about your business. What you don't want is those plates building and building and building and building up tension. Now, I'm doing a lot of this from recall. So if a geologist is listening to this and he says that's phooey, it's still a good illustration.
Also, comment or subscribe and or
Yeah.
reach out to us. We'll have you on the show, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. But I always remembered that, and it's more like, why, there probably are, there probably is some conflict or some differences of opinions that really aren't worth talking about, and you should probably just let them go. But if you're going to let them go, you got to let them go. You
Mm.
you cannot stack them up for that big summit, that big event that you're going to happen. So I think even in my early 20s, I started realizing that actually what I wanted to do in life is I wanted to create more of a fluidity, a stream of consciousness in my relationships, so that it almost always feels up to date, and so that and I kind of related to three linebackers that are sharing the same line. They're always talking to each other, who's got who, who's got what, arguing a little bit, but it feels more natural,
Yeah.
to the game of football.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I love that analogy of the plates rubbing against each other. You want consistent tremors. And, I think likening that to this conversation, if you aren't constantly maybe coming into some kind of friction, some kind of communication, some kind of alignment, clarity, then there is going to be an event. There is going to be a situation where maybe even your hand is forced
Yeah,
and you're going to have that conversation,
right.
not in the way you initially maybe wanted or needed to.
Yeah, and I think another thing is an attitude of it has to be a battle. There has to be a winner and a loser. And how many times have you entered into conflict and you come out of it on the other side, if it's with another reasonable human being and you're reasonable, is that a lot of times it's misunderstandings. A lot of times it's a misaligned values. It's it's something that can usually be worked out between reasonable people. Yeah, I'll take a breath there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one way we could kind of phrase this is delay usually increases difficulty. The longer we wait, once again, the more complex maybe the conversation gets. Where as if we caught it on the front end, it's a pretty straightforward. Oh, okay, you just misunderstood the expectation, but now we've waited, too long. Maybe some emotions have got in there. Maybe some personal stuff has got in there. Maybe your personal life is bleeding into it. Their personal life is bleeding into it. A lot has happened since the initial situation, and so the conversation you avoid today often becomes a crisis tomorrow. I also think, and I've heard this, and it's kind of stuck with me. This phrase, confrontation's connotation. Confrontation's connotation. Oftentimes, the connotation around a confrontation is negative. Oftentimes, when we use the word confrontation, it's a fight or a very heavy argument. Whereas maybe reframing the idea of confrontation as clarity, we're going to clarify who we are. We're going to clarify who we're not. In our home, in our marriage, with our children, we need to confront a situation to make sure we all understand who we are in this house and who we're not at work, in our ministry, wherever we have influence as leaders, making sure that when we see something that is out of alignment, that we have the courage to confront it. But it starts with maybe reframing. Okay, confrontation doesn't have to be a negative, to your point. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a winner and loser. It's how do we help everybody here get on the same page?
Yeah, that I like that. I think also what I want to do is I knew you were going to ask this question today, so I've been thinking about it, and and though we can't escape conflict, and I don't think that is. I mean, you posed the proposition has to do with why are we avoiding conflict. But maybe we need to work hard in this episode to say, no, let's do not avoid conflict. Let's see conflict as normal. But how do we do that? And I was thinking today, being somebody who has been shaped by Scripture all my life, Christian Scripture, I was reminded of James chapter 4. Now, now James, as I understand it, he was not only the half brother of Jesus, but he was also, in today's terms, we'd call him the lead pastor of Jerusalem. And he wrote this letter that we have in our New Testament today called James. And it's a brutal, it's a black and white, concrete. This is what Christianity looks like. Get your act together, kind of a thing. It's not most people's favorite book, but there is something in James 4 that I want to read, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And what I like about this is, sometimes the conflict isn't between me and you. Sometimes the conflict is just within me, and I haven't dealt with it yet. But let me read it to you. It says, James asks a question. This is in James chapter 4, verse 1. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Now, granted, the context here is first century church in Jerusalem. But when I finish reading this, I think we could probably all agree that we're not breaking any exegetical rules here or hermeneutical rules here. You could probably apply this like peanut butter across all humanity.
I like peanut butter.
Yeah, me too. I love peanut butter. So what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and you do not have. And then it goes into some pretty dark examples of where this leads to. I'll leave it at that. And I think, what I've always remembered the first time I probably heard it in a sermon before I read it, as a kid. But even as a kid, I remember whoever it was that was speaking said that most of our conflict is internal, that we have a fight going on inside of us, and probably we need to start there. So to that point and that point only, I might suggest that, yeah, there probably are some conversations that we don't need to have if we haven't really gone through it. But here's the cool thing though. If you build strong relationships, you don't have to be that timid. You could say, hey, I'm upset about this. I'm not sure if I should be as upset as I am. And if you're saying that within a context that is a normal thing, then people lean in. Okay, well, what are you upset about? And then you can explain what you're upset about. People go, oh. And then they're able to, share back and forth until usually there's some kind of understanding. I guess the other thing I wanted to share, Winston, is that I was thinking of an analogy of you took a job and maybe you missed it during the interview process. Maybe you missed it during the onboarding, but this job did not turn out to be the job that you thought that you were going to get. So that's your perspective. Your boss's perspective is you're not doing what you said you could or would do.
Yeah.
And so what's really interesting is that that's conflict in behavior, that's conflict in expectations. But what's really interesting is that those two people could come together and probably agree that something fell through the cracks, maybe on both ends, and then to agree to separate and that being a positive outcome versus somebody firing somebody, and
Quitting.
quitting, walking out or whatever.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that one more thing. I like the term summit and event because I think that in and of itself is problematic. If it is a summit, if it is an event, and what we mean by that is we're exaggerating
Reality.
the reality, right? I don't think you can solve that in one sit down, in one. I think once it's gotten to that point, it's so confusing that it's very difficult. So once again, let's come back to those plates. It's probably more about untangling, always untangling. Always. So those are some pretty strong thoughts I have about it.
Yeah, yeah, I love the reality that we have to address the internal dialogue
Yeah.
that's going on before we get into external dialogues. How often when we do get into a confrontational or a conflict conversation, are we speaking from a place that hasn't been addressed? We're speaking from frustrations, but I've never asked myself, why am I really frustrated? Like, I'm frustrated with the outcome, but why am I frustrated with the outcome? What internally is going on that I'm not courageous enough to unpack and say, okay, really, I'm taking this situation personal,
Yes.
right?
Oh, you just hit it.
I've made this more personal than it needs to be. Though I'm telling you, I want this expectation met, and I'm frustrated that it's not. Really, the outcome is making me feel insecure, or it's making me feel like, oh, I'm less of a leader because this, outcome is not happening the way it is, right?
People are insensitive. We just are. We're insensitive, meaning, now I'm using a harsh term, meaning that unless we have some kind of supernatural power, we're not always reticent about all the needs of those around us 24/7. So we're going to miss stuff. We're going to be insensitive. So when I see someone's insensitivity and then to your example, I personalize it. I take it personal, and then somehow I'm wounded, and the other person doesn't even know that their behavior, for whatever reason, is in my mind unbecoming. When it's might be more my issue. So I think leveling the playing field here, making sure that is there really a conflict going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a conflict in my mind, but is
Yeah,
there?
yeah,
Take a step back. Is there an actual conflict
right.
happening? There's a framework here that
Yeah,
that we can supply
let's
called
go through it.
care. C, clarify the issue. What exactly is bothering you? I think we've just kind of
And that can start with us,
entered
right?
entered into that space. And then separate facts from assumptions. Then we get into A, assume positive intent. We've touched on that. Enter believing the person isn't your enemy,
That's a big one.
right? Once again, so often the inner dialogue has framed the situation to where, okay, I'm the victim, and I need to make sure that my point is getting across, and they're against me somehow, and so we want to enter believing the person isn't your enemy. Curiosity before accusation. I love that. Can we just stay curious about the situation? Can we come into the conversation with a posture of curiosity, trying to understand? R, respect the person. Once again, attack the problem, not the person. If I'm taking it personal, then I'm probably going to make it personal on the other end, right? So I have to come in not taking it personal and figure out, okay, how do we focus on the issue at hand? And then E, engage directly. Don't hint, don't beat around the bush. Have the conversation with the person, not about the person. Anything
Yeah.
there, Jim, that you want to double click on?
No, keep going. I think when you mentioned here also, you haven't mentioned it yet, but don't triangulate. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, trying to present different scenarios and situations, and you're trying to almost trap the person into some kind of preconceived notion on your end versus like, all right, let's state the facts. What do you see versus what do I see? One of the things I try to be intentional about is almost, taking this metaphorical item that's on the table and like picking it up and putting it in between both of us and describing that item and trying to say, okay, this is what I see.
That's very good. That's
What do
very
you
wise. No,
see?
that's very wise.
And invite them into my observations.
Yeah, looking at something other than the person sometimes, even if it's a word picture, that you're creating. Hey, I'm in this boat right now, and it's a boat of confusion. I was hoping you could hop in with me
Mm.
and just tell you some of the things. So in this boat, I'm kind of confused about this. Here's my ideas. Here's my thoughts. What are your ideas? So even if we don't have something literally concrete that we can put in front of somebody, we can still create word pictures. That do the same. That
That's
do the
great.
same
If I
thing.
if I ever talk to you about a boat, you know what's happening. You know what's I'm gonna take that. That's awesome. What would you say is the biggest mistake people make before a hard conversation?
Well, we have an upcoming episode that we're going to be talking about in knowing thyself and understanding ourselves. I think one of the things to take this acronym that you've put together, CARE, and where you can get the most mileage out of it is when you recognize that these steps, these very good principles, are still somewhat cased in the context of temperament.
Great leaders don't ignore their past, they learn from it. Every decision you've made, every mistake, every win, every failure, it's all shaping the leader you're becoming. In Story, the art of learning from your past, you'll discover how to turn experience into wisdom, setbacks into strategy, and pain into purpose. This isn't just a book about reflection, it's a playbook for growth. If you want to lead with clarity, humility, and confidence, your story matters. Learn from it. Grab your copy of Story, The Art of Learning from Your Past, where books are sold.
And so, for example, the temperaments that are concrete, they're very black and white in the way that they think. So it's very difficult for them to come off black or white into the gray, and instead they've concluded. So with and that's not necessarily wrong because they're also people that we can kind of count on to call things the way they are. If you're in a meeting with somebody who's concrete, they can sense the room better than an intuitive can sense the room because intuitives living in their head, whereas a concrete thinker is taking in everything that's out and then bringing it in. But if they feel something, see something, sense something, that can become simply gospel truth to them. And trying to untangle that with words or philosophy is going to take a lot longer to do. Or on the other end, if they're intuitive, they may not be as fast as you'd like them to be to land the plane and say, yeah, this was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. They're going to back away from it and put it in a larger context and almost kind of say, is it really that big of a deal? And that would be insensitivity. So in other words, the black and white person can be insensitive in that they're stubborn and won't move off their woundedness. And the intuitive thinker will have a way of just kind of put it into the ocean and say, well, compared to all the things happening in the world, is this really that big of a deal?
It's really good.
You see how they're both really insensitive?
Yeah. Yeah,
And so we
we're
just
just
like,
all insensitive people.
yeah, we just whack each other, whack, 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 whack a mole.
Now I understand why we don't want to have these conversations. What's the point? What's the point? Nihilism, nihilism. As we get into, and you kind of touched on this already, but disagreement, there is a positive perspective around different disagreement. What would you say healthy teams disagree, Jim?
Oh yeah, I would say that even really good friends disagree more than people who think they're friends and don't. I mean, before we jump to that, I think there's one other quick thing is that one of the biggest mistakes we could make. I just jumped on the temperament thing because I knew that was coming. Is to rehearse what it is that you're going to say.
Scripted.
Yeah, script it, man. That's fatal. That's a fatal mistake because you're not there. you're not present.
You're back in your scripting,
Yeah, yeah, you're still
back in the
memorizing.
mirror.
You're still memorizing because it ain't gonna work anyway. you know,
There's
so
no way you can anticipate
yeah,
what
yeah,
what
yeah.
will
Stuff that
actually
goes.
unfold.
Okay, so what was your question?
Yeah, just getting into, because sometimes I think we think disagreement is either a sign of disrespect, or we think that disagreement is somehow, once again, negative, though it can be if not done well. But why would you say healthy teams disagree? Whether, once again, marketplace, ministry, a team at home, sports teams, right? Like, what does healthy disagreement look like?
Well, do I like these people? Have I made a decision? Going back uh, to some of our core content at Lead Today is leaders need to choose people, and sometimes you have to adopt someone and to choose them because you didn't get to choose them in the beginning. So now you have to go through the intentional process of adopting them. A leader needs to work really hard at liking the people around them, because if they do that, they're going to engage more in those smaller, conversations, that 1 minute manager, kind of idea. And I think there's a sense of safety and a sense of trust. The more smaller disagreements that you have, course corrections, those kinds of things. I think a lot like Working Genius, Patrick Lencioni, the way he describes it is that, at least in one portion, like you come up with an idea, and you, as an invention kind of a person, you come up with an idea, you think it's really good. I mean, you think it's amazing. What's the holdup? Let's do this. And then somebody with discernment, if they're wise, what they need to do is they need to go, hey, that really is a pretty good idea. And I was thinking, and so the idea is that they want to add, to it to make it better. Now,
Versus just shooting it down.
just yeah, versus shooting it down, because then that can cause. I mean, learning how to say things
Mm,
is just important. And sometimes if you just said that, I'm really not good at this. I'm really not good at this, but my intent is this. And here's the things I appreciate about you. And this last thing, I really appreciate this about you. And I'm struggling. I'm struggling with this thing. So I need to, there's just sometimes not enough honest humility, in how we approach one another.
it's really good. Yeah, I think I often run into, either with myself or with others, part of even having a hard conversation or learning how to disagree is learning the language required. And it's like, oh, if I feel inequipped to even have this conversation, I'm less likely to have it.
Yeah.
But if I have the right tools, the right words, the right frameworks, care that we just used, that empowers me. That I have more confidence in approaching these
Well,
spaces.
yeah. And like, let's say you're confronting somebody about whatever. And is it I mean, how do you see that happening? I mean, how do you see that going? I would think that you'd want to share what it is that you want to share, and then, as you said earlier, invite how they see it, invite whatever. But if it does feel more like a one-way communication, because sometimes that'll happen, and that's really not what you want. You want a dialogue. Then from that rest of the time, you're going to take work to try to mind that out of the person, saying, I'm not getting a response from you. Can I get a response? What are you thinking right now? Because you really want to get that honesty, out of there. Because if that's not handled right, it's just going to compound, as time, goes on. Because maybe what they heard isn't what you said. So you really want to get that out.
Yeah, and maybe even asking, can you repeat back to me anything that you understood just now? Like, just to make sure we're on the same page. What did you hear me say?
Something like that. You just don't want to sound condescending, right? You
Yeah.
you want to say, I mean, that's how I see it, Winston. How do you see it?
Yeah.
Something like that. Winston, sometimes I'm not aware how my words sound or how my demeanor is. Have I come off in any
Mm,
weird way? I mean, what are you reading off of me, right now?
mm.
That, and try to
Yeah.
get that, because I'm learning too,
Yeah.
right?
That's great. When we get into disagreements as teams, maybe one way to kind of differentiate healthy from unhealthy. Unhealthy teams avoid tension. They smile publicly but complain privately. Those are symptoms of an unhealthy team. A healthy team constantly challenging ideas, working to protect relationships. Once again, privately and publicly, we're working to make sure that we have integrity in our relationships. And then the goal is the best outcome.
Yeah.
It's not my outcome, my
Yeah.
idea. It's the best idea wins.
Right.
The best idea wins. And those are some ways to, briefly differentiate. Is my team healthy? Is the environment I'm in healthy? Are the relationships I'm in healthy or unhealthy? And once again, we want to clarify also the difference between a debate and a discussion. A debate, the goal is to win. I'm going to win this debate. My argument is going to be better than your argument. But for healthy teams and for healthy conversations around conflict, the goal is to learn.
And I really like these 3 rules that you put together for healthy disagreement. I think these are really, really spot on. I mean, I'll mention number 1 is separate ideas from identity.
Yeah.
We didn't really nail that in our previous discussion. I think that's really important. You did mention don't take disagreement personal. That's easier said than done sometimes, but it often might represent where the relationship's at. And so that can be a good sign. Oh man, we got to go deeper in our relationship. That shouldn't have offended me the way it did.
Yeah, and just to double click on that real quick, especially in a creative space, I have the opportunity to serve in some creative spaces in different environments, and for the creative person or the artist, if you will, the person who is comprising a project or leading a project, you can easily attach yourself to the project,
Hmm.
and then when the project
Yeah,
gets
it's you. Yeah,
critiqued,
yeah, you're being
you're
critiqued.
being critiqued,
Right.
right? And so doing the work, once again, that inner conversation, in the inner conflict, why do I feel the need to attach myself to this project? Why am I taking it personal when the project or the idea or the outcome that I'm responsible for is being critiqued?
And let's admit that if it's not just the 2 of us, we all have teammates and family and friends that is just a fact. They have a difficult time separating themselves from their work or their idea. So just stating this doesn't make it all better. It
Let it rip, Jim.
yeah, it just some folks. All right. So temperament, I mentioned temperament earlier, right? Temperament. So that's only part of the story. The other part of the story is their conditioning. It's what they've been through in life, the good, bad, and ugly. And sometimes that is more reactive and sticky than even their temperament. So if they've been raised in a place where they were criticized personally over things, it's a trigger for them. So even though you are being objective and say, hey, let's look at this together, this idea, this work, this project, whatever it is, let's don't freak out that that person's a bad person if they can't accept that criticism, but they're going to probably need to work through that, whether that's professionally or through friendship or through, reading, whatever it might be. But let's just acknowledge that it's not as pragmatic as it seems.
Yeah, yeah.
But I really like it. Separate ideas from identity.
And then we get into listen until you can repeat their position. Uh, Sometimes you're just hearing people talk, but you're really you're hearing so that you can respond, right? You're not really actually listening so that you can repeat back what you actually heard, and then
I love your question though. It says, "Can I explain your perspective back to you, or maybe as I heard it before I share mine?" I just want to make sure I heard it. Can I? Can I? I mean, if someone said that to me, I'd go, "Yeah, let's see if you can." you know, I mean, I'd be interested to, see if there's any nuance. Is there any slant? Or can they honestly,
objectively,
objectively say, I this sounds to me because you said this, and man, if I heard that, I go, yeah, I think. But it also gives them an opportunity to back off a little bit if they use an extreme word out of fear, because a lot of times people will grab a word in their thesaurus, and because they feel threat, they're going to pick a word that's 5 or 6 stages beyond what they're really feeling because they want to make a point. So when you say back to that person, it might be good not to argue, but to make sure that you soft land that word again to make sure that's the word that they, want to use. And the reason why that's important is because words matter.
Words matter. Words carry weight.
Yeah.
Words mean things.
Yeah. We could, for fun, we don't probably have time on this episode, but for fun, we could think of a feeling, and then you and I could probably assign 10 different words to it, but a lot of them will have depth. They'll be a foot deep, and some will be 10 feet deep. Deep meaning serious weight, you know. So I would say listen carefully, to the words, and if you've got to repeat it back, either create a phrase to represent the word, but I think it's better to have them hear what they said. But you got to make sure you can do that too without sound like a smart butt.
Rule number three here would be stay on the issue. Once again, we're not going at people's character. We're not trying to bring up old issues. We're not, bringing up the receipts of all the things that they've done wrong, or generalizing, saying things like "you always" or "you never." Usually, this falls in the place of probably like a marriage conversation.
Yeah.
But that can be in any context. We don't want to overgeneralize. And for time's sake, we'll jump into and land the plane here with the art of negotiation, which I think is probably a lost art in some
Yeah.
ways, especially just in not necessarily deal making, but in just conversation, hard conversations, and conflict. When people hear the word negotiation, they often think of manipulation, but how should we think about this, Jim?
I think you have to kind of agree in the conversation and in the relationship of what we're trying to do, because again, if a abstract thinker is trying to get a concrete thinker off of a certain belief, well, that's the nature of a conversation. Of course, you're trying to influence, one another, but some are better with words than other people, and but their feelings run deep, so they can feel like they're being manipulated because they can't think of the same words or the phrases, or maybe they're just not as quick-witted, so they end up leaving that situation feeling whipped, feeling emotionally abusive or whatever. And maybe abusive is too deep of a word for what we're talking about, altitude of words. um yeah, so what I like about the idea of negotiation is this idea of collaboration or dialogue, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and seeing it as a partnership where we're trying to come to a place because we're complex. With one of the things I wrote in Reimagining Leadership that will be out later this summer is that relationships are complex. Winston Harris, you are complex. Jim Piper, you are complex. And our relationship is a separate entity all to itself, and it is complex. So there's at least three things that make it complex, not to mention all the stuff on the outside of this relationship that's trying to get into it. So it's complex. So I think conflict is, if we stage it correctly, it's really two or more people work collaborating together to an understanding.
To a win-win.
Yeah, to a
To
win-win.
win-win.
That's good.
We want to shift from how do I get what I want, and that could once again get all the way tied up into identity
Hmm.
and taking things personal. But the shift when we're talking about negotiation, collaboration is what is the win-win here versus how do I get what I want. And so maybe some four quick principles for negotiation. One, understand interests, not just positions. For instance, if you're asking your boss, off for a day, and I need Friday off versus, my daughter's graduation is Friday. Maybe framing that ask,
Yeah.
framing that
A lot of people
request.
don't do that.
Yeah, you just transactional. You submit
Yeah,
the
because
request
then the boss says, well, they don't care. They just want to take a day off, you know.
versus giving some texture to what the request is, and understanding once again interest creates options. And secondly, ask more questions. I think once again in the we talked about curiosity earlier. Questions uncover motivations, concerns, constraints. People generally reveal more through questions than just their stated argument or their position. And then number three, focus on shared goals. Once again, what are we aiming for? Is it better team culture?
And what we agree on.
Yeah. What was the upfront? We
Hmm.
have another podcast where we'll be touching on onboarding, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What is the upfront expectation? What has been the agreement? Maybe in a marriage, we're just trying to get stronger, or in a marketplace space, but better customer service, maybe in ministry. We're trying to be more effective. But the question is, what are we trying to accomplish together? What is the desired outcome and goal? And then lastly, know what matters most. We can't negotiate everything, and so what are we specifically trying to address in this
Yeah.
conversation? We can't solve the world's problems right now,
Right.
but what is in front of us today? The best negotiators aren't attached to every preference; they're committed to the most important outcomes. Any last thoughts, parting thoughts here on this?
I have one very clear one. Moving forward, I want to think of conflict as an ongoing journey rather than an event. I think we increase anxiety. I think we increase anxiety. We increase misaligned expectations and goals and all of those things when we think that conflict can be resolved by the one big comment versus making conflict a habit, always adjusting, always thinking. So I want to think of it more as, walking on a journey with your teammates, your friends, your family, and see it as a journey. Every day, walk in transparency, walk in honesty, walk in curiosity.
That's great. That is great. And as we end today, I just want to pose a question. What's the one conversation you've been avoiding? What's the one conversation you've been avoiding? There's probably a conversation in all of our lives that if we have it, the sooner the better. There's a conversation that is inhibiting us for stepping into the future that's before us. And so get honest. Get honest, lean in. What is that one conversation you've been avoiding? Hopefully, we've given you some handles to have that conversation. But until next time, we'll see you on the Today Count Show. Thanks for spending part of your day with us on the Today Count Show. If today's conversation encouraged you, challenged you, or helped you grow, share it with someone in your circle because we're better when we grow together. And be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected with us on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And remember, real change doesn't happen someday, it happens today. Until next time, keep showing up, keep building, keep making today count.